Right. Hi guys, can you hear me? I think we'll get started in like 5 minutes. Let's just get people to join in. Please do well to share the link with people and anyone who is interested in this session once again. Thank you so much. I think for the sake of time, we'll just get started. We won't, take any more time. Um, we won't take any more time. Good evening, everyone. Once again, thank you for joining to this session, and I really hope that we all learn a thing or two from the session once again. And yeah, I really do hope we had a great weekend as well, and I hope that we are energized for the week ahead. So today we're just going to continue on our topic, which was the modular monolith architecture with Laravel. So what I would love to do is I'll try to hey, something wrong. So what I'll try to do is I'll ensure that I'll just do a recap of what we did last session. That was last week, and then I'll move into what we're supposed to do proper for today. So the reason why I'm going to do that recap is because we're actually doing a recording right now, just in case anybody wants to make reference to what we have discussed so far. Um, so that's why I'll just do a quick recap and then we can move forward to what we have for the day. So once again, thank you for joining us. My name is Daniel Mabadeje. For those that don't know me, I'm a software developer and I'm one of the co-founders of PHPTalks. And we are trying our best once again to have our monthly sessions where we discuss different concepts in PHP and programming generally, and we look to have very interesting mind intriguing concepts as well, just to see how people's thought process are and how we can just make our application better as well. So yeah, let's get right into it. So I'll share my screen and I would um do a little presentation of what we had last week. So last week we established what modular monolith is. So we kind of said it was like that bridge between your microservices and your conventional monolith application, right? So that means that modular monolith application kind of gives you the best of both worlds, having a monolith application and still having some of those attribute of microservices. And according to Geeks for Geeks, it's actually a design pattern that promotes modularity and separation of concerns within the software, right? Modular monolith architecture actually, promotes separation of concerns and modularity in the application. We also established last week that sorry, that we also established last week that you know models, we every module has to be loosely coupled or highly cohesive. We discussed that loosely coupled such that they don't have to depend on each other. Each module doesn't have to depend on each other for it to perform certain things, and highly cohesive, meaning that you know how does the module come together? How does the elements in the module come together, to achieve a particular goal, right? And yeah, it says that this pattern is to help the code organize the code in smaller reusable components or modules, making it easier to understand. So the aim is to make it easier to understand, develop, and maintain complex applications, right? And it went further to say modular monolith breaks down the application into smaller independent modules, each responsible for specific functionalities of business domain. Despite being a single code base, modules are loosely coupled and can develop, deploy, and maintain independently. Then another thing that we mentioned was that when it comes to loosely coupled, applications, is that they shouldn't be dependent on each other. One and two, we mentioned that models have boundaries as well. So there are certain boundaries that we're going to put in place for models, right? On how models should operate. Now, we also established that we're just going to be building a simple blog as our last week, and we said we're going to use modular monolith, of course, and we'll try to use repository patterns. We also established that we are going to be doing a lot of overkills just for illustration purposes. So I do not expect that for simple applications you require um some of the design patterns that we are using here. And we also what else did we talk about? I'm trying to remember what other thing that we discussed as well, right? So, but yeah, those are the few I could remember right now. And let me just stop sharing and share my entire screen so that we could see. Do not disturb for tomorrow morning. Okay, here. So let me share my screen so we could see what we had previously in our code base. We set up a new Laravel application. We just set up a new Laravel application, and inside the Laravel application, one moment. Inside the new Laravel application, we had our models, and we set up a kind of basic structure of what is going to be. We said it's going to be API based. So we had our APIs, right? We had our controllers, we had repository classes, we had DTOs inside. We had request classes. I don't think we had request class this in last week. I think I just added that. Then we had the service class, then we had routes, and we had the models. So another thing that we discussed last week was we spoke about how we can enable these modules to work on their own by introducing service providers to them. So that means each module we can introduce a service provider that extends the app service provider. So for user, we did set up a provider, user service provider. This user service provider was basically loading the migrations and merging the config that we may need here, right? And then the last thing we did, we also established how to set up tests inside the modules. We established that these tests are being loaded from this PHP unit.xml, meaning that once we set this directory like this, we could easily load our tests inside our modules as well. So those are basic things that I think we discussed. The last time we stopped at fetching a user because of time. We said that we wanted to fetch a user, and we broke them down into layers. We had the controller, we had the service class, we had the repository. So basically the controller was communicating with the service class, and the service class was basically sending in whatever user that was stored in the DB as at then. Now I also mentioned that we'll try to make this thing a little bit test driven, right? And to be honest with you, I didn't really have so much time to cook up a lot of things, but I still tried as much as possible to set up certain structures for the tests, and I did a little stuff. So the first thing I need to say is that last week we had an issue, right? We were trying to load from the user repository at first, and if you can remember from last week, we had the index method inside here. We had the index method inside here, which was basically returning which was basically returning users, right? So we did something like user paginate. I think as our last week, we said we should return user paginate as our last week. But then having this, while we still have a base repository, did not really make sense per se. We have a base repository here that's handling basically most of our CRUD operations, which was um the find or fail, where we've create updates, update or create, delete, index, and paginate. So I had this base repository already set up, and I just keep it there. So what I did was that on the user repository, I had to just pass in the user model inside the constructor, and that did the trick. So I don't know why I didn't think of that as a then, but then that was all I needed to do. So just passing this model, whatever model we're going to use, we pass it inside the parent constructor, which is here, and that will do the trick. Now that has been done, we're moving to the order of the day. So as you can see, I've set up some tests over here. I've set up some tests over here. We can see we had feature and user and unit test. So I have a test to test for the user service class. I have a test for the user repository class. Please, can anyone hear me? Just to be sure. Okay, cool. So I have the user repository test, I have the user service test, and I have the user API test, right? So if we do a PHP artisan server, I'm expecting that most of these things would not run as I right now, and then we'll just build from there. So right now we're just going to be focusing on the user side, and then we try to move to the post. In this lesson, we're not going to cover any authentication for now, right? We're not going to cover any authentication for now. So basically, we're just going to be passing our user IDs manually. I'll try to just seed one user, and then we pass that user ID as a like that, and when we're creating posts, we just put in the user ID. So no authentication will really be implemented in this session. So PHP artisan tests, if we run that, yeah, we have a lot of failing tests, and we're just going to start from somewhere. Right. So we're expecting that when user creation happens, we're expecting a 201 test, right? We're expecting a 201. That means that the user was created, but then we're receiving a 200, which is wrong, right? I don't think we implemented anything last week that had to do with creation yet. Okay. So let me close this. Let me close this and go into the user service quickly. So once again, if you have any question, just you do well to stop me at any point in time, and we'll try to attend to the question as soon as possible. So yeah, we have the store method over here, which I believe is coming from here, the controller. We are calling in the store method from there. But now you can see that in this user API test is supposed to return a 201. That means that it's failing, right? So I'll just quickly do a PHP artisan server. Am I sure my server is running? My SQL server is running. Yeah, so that should work. Then one moment. Let me carry this to up here. Yeah. I didn't put that right. Okay, so I'll just start in my SQL server here, and then we'll continue. So yeah, so let's just go on. So I should come here. We remember we had an API documentation for us. So I'll just type that in. Hey, see, my keyboard just stopped working. Let me control click this. Yeah, it's in. And start. All right, cool. So MySQL refused to connect, which is valid. You just expect MySQL to start. Okay, cool. So if we refresh this, this should run. Yes, it did. Now, what a beautiful landing page. So if we want to come to our documentation and see what we have at the moment, let me paste this here. Okay. Something wrong. something is wrong. One moment. Let me click this again. Okay. Okay, so you can see that we have a documentation over here. This is supposed to get the resource. This is supposed to store. This is supposed to display the specified resource and all of that. So yes, another thing that I forgot to mention was I loaded my routes from here in my app service provider for now. No, not my app service provider, my app.php. So what I basically did was that I set the base part to the modules that we have, right? I put the pattern to get all the routes. And then I just basically looked through each of the directories to check for the routes.php. And then I loaded the routes. So I don't think we'll need this API.php for now, since we are using the routes um in each of the modules. So let me just comment this out, and if we refresh this, this should be out. Yes, cool. Now let's check. Our get user should still work. Users fetch successfully. But if we do a store, this is returning 200. Okay, but nothing is being returned, which is the same thing with our tests over here, right? So let's just get started. We try to fix the creation of user, and then we proceed from there. So we can just come here and say, let this return this user service, and we can say store this user service store, and then we want to pass in the request. So normally I like to create custom request classes for every creation that I do, right? So rather than having in my service class having to come and do something like requests validated kind of thing, which I'm not saying is a bad thing to do, but I just like to make the whole thing really simple, or should I say have everything in their respective places. So I'll just create a new request, this thing here. Okay, I have one, create user request. So a create user request is meant to, no, this is not right. So a create user request is meant to receive the name, email, password, right? Name, email, password. And I've created a base request class just for certain things like field validation and all of that, right? So you don't have to do this. You don't have to do much of this configuration at all. It's just my own way of doing things, right? So I'll get this create user request, come here and say that this is the argument I want to receive. So create user request. Let's come to the controller. Try to close all of this so that we're not having plenty of things. Try to close all of this here. So what we are receiving here is a create user request. So this should be required, and then we are just, let's pass in that request. You could choose to also give it the name, you know, if you want to have more attention to detail or something. So yeah, store. So now we have the request, the custom request class that we have. The next thing we need to do is we want to try and store this user on our database. So basically what we could do here is we could say this user repository, and I think we have a create method. The create method, inside that create method, we could say, there are many ways we could go about this. We could say requests validated. So this is just a quick way of doing things. And we can say, hey, there's no request validated, create user request validated. And we can easily say user is equal to this. And we can say if user. So we would still definitely do a refactor to this, but this is just like the basic. So we could say return. We have our success method that we created earlier. Our success method to be we are passing in the user that we just created. We're passing a message. We can say user created successfully, right? And this would not still run, or our test will still fail. Why? Because we are expecting a 201, but we're at the moment by default we're returning a 200. So we could just easily add that here and say, okay, we want to return 201. And if it fails or if it didn't work, right, we could just say um, return a failure, return a failure that we've created. Remember, mind you, in our last lesson, we set up all of this in our base service class. So failure, I could still say user, I could still say user, or yeah, I could still say user. I could say user could not be created, could not be created, could not be created. Yeah. So and the status code will be 500. So if we run our test, I'm expecting that this should pass. I'm expecting that this should pass. No, it did not pass. Okay, so but receive 422. Failed that asserting that 422 is identical to 201. So what's the issue? Let's go back to our user API test. User API tests. What was it sending? Oh yeah, it required a password. So we can come here and say, let's pass in a password as well. So I'll just give it password, generic password. And then if we try this once again, do we still have an error? Okay, we do, but it's different. So we are having a different error where it says 422. Where it says 422. So it says that response does not have a does not have JSON validation errors, asserting that an array has a key, the key name, right? Okay, so let's see what is returning from our application here. So we have name. Oh yeah, so we do have error, but the array is inside there. So we could fix that in two ways. Either we can edit the test, or we could choose to edit our um base response, which would be this request here. So we could choose to say, rather than doing this, don't return error, return it like this. But then this is not still what we want, right? So what we could do is we can edit our test case to house some of these things that we have here. So we could say it should have an error, and then it should be an object with the property name, right? So we can assert that JSON validation errors, it has what do you call it quickly, it has error. So let's just check if it has error first. Clear, run. Oh, has the array has the key. Now I'm a bit confused. Okay, so let me dump this. Let me dump this and confirm. Okay. Dump this. Okay. Okay, so this is the full response. I said JSON validation errors. Okay. Okay, so what I'll just do, I'll just leave that for now, right? I'll just comment this out first. Leave this for now, and so that we could just wait for the sake of time, but still definitely come back to that. So if you do a page and test once again, that should run. That should run. Okay, yes, our API test was successful. So the next thing that we want to do is to check our repository test if it persists user data, right? So that's going to be our user repository test. The next thing is we come here, pass in our email, password over here. So we could say password, right there. I run this once again, and our user repository test runs. So I think we're getting there. One more thing, it would be the user service test. So what do we have in the user service test? We need to pass in a password once again. The password, and we put in here a password. So we could say password, create user request here, and then this should return user. Let's clear this one more time. and we still have an error. So what was the error? Call to member function validated or null. Call to member function validated or null. Call to member function validated or null. We are sending a request over here, which is this. Okay. I'm sending a request, which is this. Call to validated or null. That's new. Okay. Let's do it like this. I create a new, let me comment this out once more. And so I can say request equal to new, create user request, and we could say request name, request name is equal to Daniel. Let's just leave it at Daniel. I could say request email, request email will be equal to Daniel at php.com, and we could say password. Okay, request password is going to be equal to password. Still failed. Okay, so request validated. Okay, so let's find another way to solve this. So one way we could solve this is, let me come back here. One way we could solve this is we come on our service class, right? And transform this rather than using the validated, we could make this a DTO, but this is going to be an overkill in this case. I wanted to do this later on. So, but then I'll just do this here. So one way we could do is we could have a trait, or we could have a a private function, a private method that could serialize that data for us and convert it to an array, right? So that means we avoid this validated because our test is failing, right? So we could do something like this. We could have a private, is someone hand, okay. Can we use an array for the interim? Okay, yeah, sure. And I could just explain the concept of the DTO at once, because I do have I think in our previous session we had a method that was converting whatever value we have to an array, right? So yes, we could still do that. So let's say we have a private function, let's call it serialize user data, and we can say for now, let's just receive this, right? Let's just say it receives this, and then we create a user DTO. We say let it create a user DTO for us here. Create user DTO PHP, and this create user DTO. We put the namespace immediately. DTOs here, class create user DTO, and we can say it extends our base DTO. We put this here. I would say that what we want is the name. We need the name, we need the email, and we need the password. So we could just say constructor a constructor. Yep. So we could say what we need here is, let's say public. We need the name, so we can make it read only. We just make it mutable, read only string, and we can say name, right? The next thing we could say is we need email, yes. And the next thing we need is a password. So all of that would be string for now. We don't have any, special character or something like that. So yeah, so I could say this should return. Let's go back to our user service. We could say this should return that detail I just created. That should be the return type. And we can say return new this. So what we now want to pass here is going to be create user request name, we need the email and we need the password. So we just say email and we can say password. Right. Okay. Undefined variable create user record. Okay. Here we go. All right. So we are back to this. Now we can just basically come here and say serialize user data. Come here and pass this instead. You can say this serialize user data because we know that it has the that is returning a DTO. Right now we are sure of the return type. We can say this should return to array, right? And that should fix it. So if we run this test once again, another error. Okay, so it's a different error. Insert into users created via service. No such table users. No such table users. Am I missing something? Okay. Let's go back to our test. I think that should be the loading of migrations. Load migrations, use load. That should be in our test case. That should be in our test case. Okay, so we just say it should load migrations, use load migrations. We refresh database, sorry. Refresh database. I think migrations. Is it migrations? Hat migrations, yeah. That's migrations. Clear. Let's run this again. Okay, cool. So it's going. The next thing is it's asserting if the user is there. Daniel Mabadeje. So undefined property name. Let's come back to our service here. We're expecting name as a property. We're expecting name. Let's go back here. 1 second. Expecting name. But we do have name. You have name. So, yes, we do have a name. Right. So what could be the issue? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. JSON response. Yeah. I did see that. So we could say that let's first dump what we have here. Um, let's dump what we have here. So we can say dump users. So let's see what the response look like. Dump users. We clear this and we run this again. So it's returning our JSON response, rightly so. So we could say since this is our JSON response that is returning from our service, our the way our success method returns is message and data. So that means that we are going to be moving into each of those layers. So we could say here is going to be data. It's going to be data, and then from what we have here, we have data, and then we have name. So we could say name. Right. So let's clear this and try to run this again, and it should still run. It's still not running. Data. Set equals to data. Hey. I'm not so sure why it's not running. Any help here? Elisha, what do you think could be wrong here?
What's the challenge?
So yeah, well, we know that it's returning JSON. Our service class is returning JSON, right? Which is this,
Okay.
right? And we're trying to assert that, the name is equal to what we have set here, right? So
Okay.
I basically ran through the layers, right? Since it's returning a JSON response data, and then we are now moving to name as
You
rightly
dump
so.
user data. Dump user data, not just user itself.
Okay, data.
What do we have?
No, it didn't return anything.
Cannot
It didn't
access
return anything.
protected property. JSON response. Let's see the where you returning. Let's see your controller.
Okay, that would be in the user service here.
Mm-hmm. Click in that success thing store. No, not the controller itself. Controller itself.
Okay,
There
wait,
is a
wait.
success
We're testing
method
the
you're
service.
using.
Okay, 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 okay.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
what do you get return? What wait, okay. Open service then store. Then you're
Oh,
returning from service. What are you returning? I thought it
yeah.
was
This is what I'm
controller.
returning.
Message data status. Okay, let's enter user service. Okay, so you get user. If user, you then return success. Click into the success. Now returns this response JSON message data. All right, let's go back to the test one step at a time.
Okay. Yeah.
No, it is not the test. Okay,
Yeah. This.
dump the user again. Dump just user again. So the data is sorry. Let's debug. If you have ideas, you can bring it in. I think that's why it's a class.
Okay.
Scroll. There is a place it dumped everything. Could you scroll to that place?
Yeah.
It has data. It has content. Can you access content?
Mm. Okay. Yeah. This is a response JSON. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Does it give
Content.
you any information?
Yeah, yeah, it does.
So from there you can access data.
Okay. Yeah, that should do it.
I mean that's
Uh,
just a hack. That's a hack anyway.
it's a hack. It's not. It's not
All right.
very.
So your data on string. Content is a string, so you might either want to do JSON decode something on it.
Okay. Yeah.
Like on content, you might want to do JSON decode, then access it like an array.
Okay. So let's just do it here. But this,
No, no, no.
it's.
Allow. I think it should still be die dumb. It should still be dumb when you're sure. When you're sure of
Okay. Okay.
it actually working before you now remove that dumb, because that's what's
Okay.
stopping us.
Okay. Yeah. So just say JSON decode, and then we're just passing that user content. Right.
Content as a function. Yeah. No, no, no. Try to access. Okay, let's go.
Okay. So yeah, yeah. I think
So you can now get no, would that work? Try now. Try.
oh no, 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 it won't work. It won't work.
Because I'm thinking you should access it like an array.
Yeah. Let me see. I think it should work.
Try now.
No, it didn't. Oh, it did. Okay, yeah, it did. It did. It did. So
Did it work?
yeah, it did.
All right. Okay. Okay. There you go.
So do I
I
need to
can mute
create?
myself back now.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So test, yes, and the service class pass. So all our tests for the service has been passed, for our user service has been passed. I'll just basically do the same test, um on our documentation, and then we now proceed to creating posts as well. So let's come here, right? These are store method. If I refresh this, it's supposed to give us yes. So we have this to use. I can say user has been created and we have an ID of 1. So if you observe, something I did there was I added a DTO, which I didn't want to add at first or right now. So in this context, the where users use the DTOs can actually be very helpful is there are situations where in different models, you may require, maybe some database calls or something like that. I'm giving you an instance. Let's say on the post model, you wanted to confirm if this user exists or this user that is maybe commenting on the post or something is actually exists. That way, there are two ways you can go about it. Inside your post model, your post model, you would try to do something like user where or a user repository where user ID is equal to the ID that was given as a parameter. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, completely, right? I'm not saying that's a bad thing completely, or even when you're maybe you are trying to, let's say, you want to make the scope larger. Maybe if the person is creating a post, if the user does not exist, create the user, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing to actually do those database kind of calls or something like that. But then remember, the idea for modules is to be highly cohesive. They have one particular target, and you know the post module should only focus on things for post. The user module should focus on things for module. But now the next question would be, how do I now create a user for somebody if my post should if my post is not doing, if my post module is not doing that, right? Because okay, let's say this guy that's making that post, I want to create a user for him. How then do I do that? You have to find a way to ensure that there's some form of bridge, where you can send data from one module to another, and that's where DTOs really come in handy. DTOs simply mean data transfer objects, and they basically send data from one part of the application to another. So I could choose to probably have my repository. I could choose to probably have my repository actually, get those DTOs and and then process them and then send them to the model. I could also choose to so that would be something like this. Let's say if we go to our user repository, that could be something like this. We could say we create a custom function. Let's call it create, as we've had in the base repository. So let's say we would require that create user DTO over there. We could have that create user DTO over there, and we could say we can say parent construct. We can say parent construct since we already have such method. Sorry, not parent construct. Sorry, um this this create this create um this create, and then we now pass in that DTO that we just created. So that will be create user DTO to array, right? This is one way you could do it. Another way you could choose to do it is have an intermediary layer between each of those models. Like for me, I sometimes I try to create a new layer called DAOs, right? So in every of my module, anything that has to do with database, DAOs are data access objects. So anything that has to do with database transactions, the DAO is like that entry point, right? So if my post module want to create a user, rather than creating the user inside the post module, I could choose to use the user DAO in the user module and create that user. That way, there's still a lot of separation of concerns, and I'm not really like getting in the way of anything. But again, I am not saying it's a bad thing to actually, create user inside the post module. I mean, there are situations where you have to make such exceptions, right? And nobody's going to crucify you for that as well. But I just thought that's something that you could take note of. So that's basically it for our user in terms of creation and fetching. So what I want to do once again, so I'll just confirm that this is fetching all the users code. I like to get anything that's to do with serialization probably in a trait or a class with a static function. So for today, I'll just try to use a trait and then put this inside there, for it to work. So I could just say this traits, just create a trait and let's just call it user data serialization for now. Serialization trait, right? And PHP, come here, give it that namespace. Give it that namespace, the app module traits here, and then we can say traits. I'll just get the name. Let me just copy the name at once. Rename, copy this, and paste. Right. So then in our service, I will just move this function over there. So I could come here, put this here. Let me just make this public instead. And yes, I would still require that user create user requests. And for the sake of my code editor and loading, I will require the user DTO. So once that's done, I could call in that trait over here. So just for me, it's just a personal preference. It's not like there's any big deal in having that method inside your inside your service class or whatnot. So now that we've done for fetching for store, we want to do quickly for updating, deleting, and then viewing. So before I do that, I'd just love to refactor this a little bit, right? So I could choose to maybe put this inside try and catch, right? I could choose to put inside try and catch. I could say this should return. So I could say return this success, return this success, yep, and this should work. And then yeah, am I missing something? So argument expected. Hey, let me just confirm. Create. Um, this is this. This is this. Oh yeah, yeah. The message. Yeah, the message. The message. So I can come here and say the message is user created successfully. Successfully. And then we just put in the status code once more. So 201. And then from here we could say return this failure. We could throw it, we could leave it this way, return this failure, and I'll just put in the exception there. So this is a little refactor that we've just done, right? So basically we're just ensuring that this was actually successful, and then return this, and if it was not, we return this. Now let's do similar stuff for fetching the fetching the user by ID. So we could say, let's come here and say show, going to be a show method, and then there's going to be an update method, and there's going to be a delete method. So we could have this store, update, and delete. So you could choose to have, you could choose to have a different class for updating your user. Well, I'm not going to do that in this case because basically create user request and update user request in this case would basically be doing the same thing. So there's no use of actually trying to change the request class, right? And we could also do the similar thing for the user DTO as well. It's no much things that we need to correct there. So the next thing we want to do is we want to put in the user ID, so where we could actually delete the user. We could still leave this in the try and catch. So we could say this delete, and then we come here, okay, this delete, then we could say that user ID, passing that user ID, and that should be it, right? User ID, user could not be deleted. And then for the updates, because of the method that we have already for the updates, we are going to need two parameters, which is going to be the ID and the ID of the user and the data itself. So I'll just put in here user ID as well. So for now, I like to typecast put in my types. So I'll just put all of them to be integers because they are. And then yeah, user ID. We can say user updated successfully. So I didn't create test cases for this, right? So we'll just test this on the fly. And this we could just say return 200 in this case. So yeah, one more thing, our controller as well, we need to establish that as well. So we could say return, now controller return this show ID with a string here. Yeah. Sorry, not this show, this user service show, and we would require the request class once again here, right? So we can now say update over here, update the user. We require two parameters, which is going to be the ID and the request. So in this case, it's going to be this. And the last thing is going to be the delete, which is just going to contain the ID. All right, so delete. delete. Okay, so that's about it. So we're expecting that this is going to run on the fly. We have a user ID of 1, and we want to get the specific resource. So we could just say 1, ID 1, and the user was fetched successfully. We want to update that user parameter. So that's the thing about deducts in this case. We cannot specifically pass in those extra request parameters over here. Or I'll probably have to open Postman, but let's just check for delete at once. So if we delete, user has been deleted successfully. Oh, we put in create, so user has been deleted successfully, right? So if we run this again, false, right? So one moment, user has been deleted successfully. Oh yeah, we didn't check if we didn't check in this case if the user actually exists. So that's why this is returning success even when it's supposed to return failure. So we could say is if user um one moment. So we could say we come here and say user equal to this user repository. This user repository we say find. We say find, and then we put in the ID over there. And we can say if this user return this success, we can return this user success, or we can throw user not found. So this must be an exception. So we just say true. So let's run this. User could not be deleted, and if we go. Cool. Okay, so one more thing. Yep. All right, cool. Now that we've implemented users, I think we'll just move over to post. So it's basically a similar stuff, basically the CRUD operations that are there. And then I think we should be done for the night. We're already way behind time. So for post, I'm not going to waste any more of your time. I'll just quickly create those folders, and then God willing, we are done. So if controllers, services, yeah. Controller services. So we have a post service. Service of PHP. Inside this, we could say namespace, app, modules, post service. I can see the class is going to be a post service, which is going to extend our base service. Base service implements interface and all of that. And yep. Inside, we're going to inject our repository, but we don't have a repository yet. So I'll just create a new folder called repositories. Repositories. We can say post repository.php. For the sake of time, we would just be running. So post repository.php. I'll copy what's inside the user repository, change the namespace from there. So we can say post repository, change this to post repository. All we're expecting is going to be the post model. Right. So yeah, I think this is understandable. I don't think we've actually created the post migration yet, so I'll just do that immediately. Make model posts, and that should create the migration as well. So I'll copy this, put this inside here. So in our next lesson, I'll try to what we're just going to do is going to be refactoring, and we're going to be doing different configurations, like creating custom commands that can enable us create our controllers, or create these boilerplates that we have already and all of that, right? So that we don't have to keep copying and pasting for certain things, right? Remember, we have modified the default architecture of Laravel. So definitely we're going to make certain changes to our application. So yeah, our models, I'll paste this here. And this definitely the namespace has to change, post models. And in our migration class, we could say that what we require for this is going to be a table. It's going to be string, title, description, and then user ID. So the user ID in this case is going to be unsigned, big integer, and we can make it foreign key. So we could just choose to say, we could put this here as foreign. Here I am. Table, foreign key, user ID, references ID on users. Okay, I think that's it. Then the fillable fields here is going to be protected. So we're just going to run. Probably we're just going to do fetch post and maybe create a post, and then we should be done for the night. Protected fillable is going to be name. Is it name? Title, yeah, title, description, and then the user ID. We could just add the relationship just to be certain. Function user. This is going to return it belongs to, and this is going to return this belongs to a user class. Right. Okay, so we have our post set up. We're just going to have a post repository, and then we can add this here. Yes, we are good to go. So in our controller, I would create a controller. I'll create a controller as usual. PHP at Sun. Make controller. I'll make this post controller. Cool. Come here. Paste this. It's going to change definitely. Modules, post controllers, and this is going to extend our base controller. We're going to inject our service construct. So what we require here is going to be public user service, post service actually. Post service. Do we have that existing? Post service, yes, and then post service. So we'll basically return this post service index. Yes, that should be it. Come here, we should have us returning our repository over here. Construct public post repository. So we'll create our post repository here. We have a post repository here. Paste this. I think we're good there. So we could say public function index, for it to return index. This is going to definitely return a response JSON as usual. So you could choose to also return response JSON from your index. It's not a law that must be inside your service class as well, right? So I just thought I should put that there. So we could say return this post repository index, and Am I missing anything? Oh yeah, success. This success is, we can say, post fetch successfully. Fetched successfully. Right. Is there anything? Um, what am I returning here? JSON response. Incredible response, JSON. JSON response. Yeah, that should be it. So we create our routes. We can come here. This our new PHP routes. I could say routes API resource, API resource. We say posts. I should load it here. Yep, post. I could say post controller class. That should do the trick. Clear this, and if we refresh this, should see our post. Yes, we saw our post. So if we fetch at the moment, send API request, base table not found. Oh, we've not run our migrations. So I could say migrate fresh, see it, right? And we do have an error. App models, no such file. Okay, we don't have a CEDA yet, so that's an error that we'll need to fix in the next class. So we'll just say migrate fresh, and yeah, voila, we're in. So if we refresh this and try to send, yeah, post fetch successfully. So for the sake of time, this is where we're going to stop for tonight's class. Do we have any questions so far as regards to, what we've implemented, the tests and all of that? What do you think? What are your suggestions? What are the things that um you think we could have done better, right? And all, yeah. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Alicia. So I think we don't have any question. Okay, so in our next class, we're going to have our next class last Sunday, last Sunday of the month, which I believe would be our final class. So the thing we're going to cover in our final class is going to be um one, we're going to finish our posts, this post that we have here, ensuring that we are doing the basic CRUD operations. We're going to also try to build some commands together. And those commands are basically to help you create things like your models, specifying what model you want to do, also helping you creating a boilerplate for a new model. Now, one thing we should observe is your models, your modules, right, may not exactly be the same thing. What do I mean? Right. So you could choose to have a module that, just has just API. You could choose to have a module that maybe may just have test and all of that, depending on your use case. So it's not like there's a specific way that your modules need to be structured, right? Or every module needs to be structured. Like for instance, if you are working with external providers, maybe you want to implement Stripe, for instance, I don't see any reason why you should have this particular boilerplate structure API with the repositories and all of that. You could easily just have maybe a service class or a base class, for your Stripe implementation and all of that, right? And probably an interface, just in case you want to be switching your providers as well. So that's another thing we need to take note of. But then that command for creating a module will try to implement that as well. And the last thing we'll need to do is, while it is very good to understand how to build these um, models themselves, Gotstein mentioned the last time that there are packages that help you in your modular monolith architecture development, right? We are also going to explore that as the last thing before we round up on the series. So once again, thank you so much for joining tonight's session. I've tried to wrap this up really early. Please, if you have not followed us on PHP, on Twitter, yes, please do well to follow us there. If you have any question, please do also drop it on the group as well. Thankfully, we have a recording, so definitely this is going to be shared, in due course. And once again, I'll just use the opportunity to announce that we are having PHP Connect coming up very soon. A venue would be announced. The states and wherever we're going to do it is going to be announced. I'm sure you've already seen, little trailers here and there concerning PHP Connect as well. And this year we are looking forward to having more of builders, than just the usual guys, right? So if you're someone who is actually building something amazing, either for the community or something that's going to really be very helpful, you know, this edition is actually going to be for you. So once again, thank you so much for joining tonight's call, and I really do hope you have a great one. Have a great night. Bye.
Yeah, bye. Thank you too.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.